Managing payroll can be complex, especially when state and local taxes come into play. In this video, you'll learn how to set up and manage work locations of the employees, set up and manage additional deductions, and ensure accuracy for filing all of your payroll tax forms. These are all the advanced topics in QuickBooks Online Payroll, and it all starts right now. Welcome to the advanced part of the QuickBooks Online Payroll course right here on YouTube. Before we start, you should know that this video is number 3 out of a series of 4 payroll videos all about QuickBooks Online. And they're all together in a playlist course, and you can find the link to all the prior videos and the full playlist by looking below this video on the page right down in the description field for the link to the full playlist. So without further delay, I now present the advanced topics in QuickBooks Online Payroll.
Chapter 3. Filing Payroll Tax Forms.
Payroll tax forms are managed in the Payroll Tax Center the same way that payroll tax payments were managed. Remember, if you click the Payments tab on that page, you got a set of rectangles where each one represented a tax that you needed to pay. It's the same idea if instead you hit the Filings tab on the same page. You will get to a page that has a set of rectangles, and every box is a tax form that you need to file. So how does it know what tax forms you need to file, and how does it know what should go on there? Well, it's the same ideas that we learned before. Just like before when we said you put in the settings and the employee data, from that information you run payroll, and QuickBooks Online is programmed with the updated tax calculations. QuickBooks Online will then put the results of those calculations and all the other information you gave it onto the tax forms, and it always knows the correct numbers to put based on the payrolls that you run. So each of these little rectangles is telling you that you have to file a tax form, and it's telling you all the information you need about the tax form in order to know when to pay and file. So take a look and you'll notice it has the name of the form you're supposed to file, the due date you have to file it by, and most importantly, the tax forms period. Now, this is an idea. Tax form period is the time period in which this tax form is covered. So every payroll you ran and paid during that time period will have its numbers accumulate on the tax form. And of course, you have to send it in by the date that it shows. Now, it's a recurring idea here in payroll, so let's compare the ideas we've learned already. We learned that when you pay the workers for a time period in which they pay, that's called, for a time period in which they worked, that's called a pay period. And then the day you actually pay it is after that time period ends, and that's the pay date, the day you physically paid the worker for that related pay period. And then we talked about how it's the same idea when you're paying the taxes. There's a tax pay period, which is a time period where we paid payroll, and any payroll we paid during that time period, we owe taxes for, but the taxes we owe happen after the period ends on the tax payment date, the day we have to physically pay the taxes. So it's the same ideas as the other two. The tax forms period are the numbers from the payroll you ran during the time period of the form. And then after the cutoff date of the form, you send it in on a date that the form is required to be filed. So that's the reoccurring ideas, tax form period and tax form due date. And just like we discussed, It will be the payrolls that you ran during that time period and the money you paid to the employees that go on the form. Only the numbers from payrolls run and workers paid between those dates will accumulate on the tax form, not the dates of the pay periods where they worked. Remember, it doesn't matter when they worked, it matters when you paid them, when it comes to the numbers on the tax form. Now, if we were able to leave the leave the payroll settings to automatically file the forms for us, then all we would have to do is one click and the form would get sent in electronically and we would be done. That's how great this is. We don't even have to look at the form. We know it has the right numbers because QuickBooks Online is programmed to put the right numbers once we give it the payroll information. And if you click Preview right here, it will open in another tab in the browser, and you can print it out and mail it in, and the result will be exactly the same as if you clicked to file it online. Let's take a look. So if you're in the Payroll Tax Center, you'll notice that we already covered the Payments tab, but now you have to click the Filings tab. And if you scroll down, you will see every tax form that you are required to file. And the only thing you have to do is click one click and you'll file it if you're using the automated system. But we can't because we're using sample data. And there might be other reasons why the company you're working for won't use the automated system and changed it in the settings the way we did. But even though we can't file it just by clicking one click, what we can do is click the pull down and see that preview is available. And this is exactly what the tax form would look like when it gets sent in online or in the snail mail. And you can double check it. And these are all the numbers from the results of what you put in, combined with what QuickBooks Online is programmed to do when filling out the forms for New York State tax. So when it comes to the forms, you really don't have to do anything. Now, if we left the automation set up because we had a real company, we really wouldn't have to do anything but one click. But if there's a situation where you can't use the automation, you can at least print what the numbers are from here right on the form and send it in the snail mail. Look, you can click right here on this printer icon. By the way, first notice that when we clicked preview, it actually opened it in a different tab in the browser. So anything we do here won't affect the Payroll Tax Center. Now we can go to the print icon and you can see that you have the option of printing if it's connected to a printer or saving it as a PDF and printing it later. And then you would send it in the snail mail just like you would send it in online, and the results would be exactly the same. Now you may notice that the 941 might not appear in the Filings tab with the state tax forms. That's because the federal form will only appear on or about the end of the quarter. And don't worry, it will look the same as the New York State forms when you look at the filing tab in the tax center. And they behave the same way as far as previewing and printing. Now, the 941s will already have the correct numbers. If you're connected to the automated system in a real situation, you just click File. But in our situation, you might not be able to see it if it's not close to the end of the quarter. So what if you want to see the numbers that will accumulate on the 941 if it's not yet available to preview in the Filings tab of the Tax Center? Well, turns out there are two reports that we have already discussed in QuickBooks Online. Actually, one of them we discussed, but there are two of them that have the same information and the same numbers that would go on the 941. In fact, if you were not going to print it from QuickBooks Online and preview it, you could actually print the other two reports and fill out the 941 by hand with the numbers that are on these two reports. So if you run the reports for the same date range as the tax form period, you should get the same numbers in these reports that would show on the 941 anyway. So exactly what's on the 941? Well, the payroll summary report will show specifically total wages and taxes that will be on the form, as long as you remember to run it for this year and run the proper dates. Then the payroll tax liability report that we've been using the entire course will show exactly what's owed for the same time period. So whether you use the automated system or file it by yourself, either way, it's just a few simple clicks.
Chapter 4. Managing state and local taxes and work locations.
The payroll taxes that the company pays are determined by where the employees actually physically work. The location of their home or the location of the company's office are completely irrelevant. As soon as you add a new work location to an employee's records, QuickBooks Online will add everything you need for payroll automatically. For example, if we added a new work location because our workers are suddenly working in Minnesota, even though the office is in New York, QuickBooks Online would automatically add Minnesota tax to the payroll settings. Then, of course, you'd have to finish putting up the settings. It will also automatically add all of the important and necessary accounts in the chart of accounts to manage the Minnesota payroll taxes and Minnesota payroll liabilities that relate to paying workers in Minnesota. So let's add a work location in Minnesota, even though the headquarters of our example company is in New York. Let's take this nice example address. The people there are very nice and they don't mind us using their real physical address as our example work address for Minnesota. And then we'll make this Betty's work location. And we will hope that the sample data work. So we click the cog wheel and open payroll settings just to see that there is a section for work locations that we can manage and edit. And we can edit the existing work locations, but what we cannot do from the settings window is add a work location. That was one of the weird lists that I spoke about at the beginning that allows you to only add at the moment that you're assigning it to a particular employee. So that's what we'll do now. We close it out and we go to the employees and we go down to Betty and we come down here where it says personal info and employment details. That's where the work location is. And we click edit. Now we can click here and click add work location. It's the only way to do it. And the address that we're adding is the one that I showed, 3464 North Rice Street, St. Paul, Minnesota. And we click add location. Okay, now this is their suggestion compared to what I entered, and I don't think I'll ever understand the difference. Sometimes they tell me what I entered has the extra 4 numbers. Just go with their suggestion so that it will work. And we click add location, and then we click save. And now you will notice something very interesting. We again open the cog wheel, again open the payroll settings, and now, in addition to seeing New York state tax, we now see, for the very first time, Minnesota tax in the payroll settings. And all we had to do was add one work location to one employee, and QuickBooks Online will account for those state taxes. So now we just add the required state tax data to the settings, and then we'll be able to pay Betty. So let's first double-click and open the Minnesota tax section of the payroll settings and put in the following state information. We have to put a number in this format for a tax ID number for Minnesota. I chose this number, and I sincerely hope that this sample data will work with you the way it worked with me. Then, for the rest of the data, you can leave the unemployment insurance number blank, put in 0 for the federal loan assessment, 1% for the unemployment, and 0% for workforce. These numbers are numbers that I tried, and it allowed me to use these sample numbers. So we type in the tax ID number, the example tax ID number, and then we put in quarterly as our choice, 0% as our federal loan assessment rate, 1% as our unemployment insurance rate, 0% as our workforce development rate. And now, if it does not require an unemployment insurance account number, we can click Save. Now, don't worry, because it will allow us to click I'll handle it myself, meaning I'll come back to that and click Save. And you will see that it will save the tax info without the unemployment number, because if we go back, it did remember the tax ID number. Okay, we have to do this as well. We have to answer these questions or it won't let us pay Betty. Okay, so we just click here. Account, no, yes. Determine the pay family cover, and we just answer this question. That's it. We just answer this question as part of the settings, and don't forget it. Company is exempt from contribution. Don't worry about this because we know we're learning. Save, save. And we don't need tax expert and phone support. Oh my God, it makes it difficult to save. And now we're done. So now we're able to pay Betty, and let's pay Betty for the next consecutive pay period in this quarter and check the result. So we click Run Payroll, and Betty is on the twice a month schedule. We click Continue. Now we're only paying Betty because we want to see the effect. And at this point, this is the last time we can pay her during this quarter. And of course, I've been running the numbers consecutively, and I guess I'm up to the 16th of March for the actual pay date, just to make things simple so that we can see how the software works. Now I'm going to preview and watch what happens when I drill down in this particular check. When I click Net Pay and I click the drill down, you can go down and you can see that the other withholdings are showing down here for Minnesota withholdings and tax. We now have Minnesota income tax withheld from Betty's check. You will also see Minnesota employer taxes imposed on the employer because one of the employer's work locations is in Minnesota for an employee. So we agree with this and we click Save. And now we click Submit Payroll. And look what happens in the trial balance. We will click Reports, custom trial balance. And notice, Minnesota income tax and Minnesota unemployment tax have been added to the accounts in the trial balance. In fact, you can prove that they're in the chart of accounts because they're on the trial balance, and they are liabilities. They are payroll liabilities. All here, you can see Minnesota unemployment tax, Minnesota income tax has automatically been added to the trial balance at the moment that we paid someone in a work location in Minnesota. And lastly, we can check the payroll reports that we bookmarked in our browser. We can click Payroll Tax Liability Report, and you can see Minnesota taxes. If in fact we go this year and apply it, Minnesota taxes has now been added to the payroll liabilities report.
Chapter 5, Managing Additional Deductions from Employees' Pay.
The QuickBooks Online software will only automate the inclusion of federal and state and local taxes. So only if you owe a specific department of government, QuickBooks Online will do all the payroll and tax withholdings for you. However, there are some things that are mandated by the government that require an employer to pay a percent of gross pay, but not to a department of government. Some of these things require the employer to pay a percent of the payroll, gross pay, to a private insurance company. In some cases, the employer is allowed to withhold and keep some small amount from the worker's check to help the company cover the cost of this extra expense that gets paid to a private insurance company that's also based on the amount of gross pay. And one example of this is New York State disability insurance. Also, a garnishment for a legal judgment is another example of a payroll deduction that will not be automatic because it's not a tax the way federal, state, and local taxes are. The employer is required to withhold a percent of a worker's gross pay, even though they're not sending it to a department of government. So our two examples of these other deductions will be these two things. So in our example, Alan and Candy are subject to New York State disability insurance withholdings. We click the payroll app and go over to employees. We open up Alan's record, double click, and we scroll down to Alan's section of deductions and contributions. So we click start, and now we're putting in a deduction that's very well known. It's New York State disability insurance. It's the worker's contribution towards that insurance. So we click add deduction, and this is another deduction. And because it's very well known, and because our work address or one of our work addresses or work locations is in New York State, one of the options is this, New York State disability. Okay, maybe spelled with one S, who knows? Spelling doesn't count in this class. And then we click save. And now, done. And let's do the same thing for Candy. Employees, go down to Candy, go down to other deductions and contributions, start, and Candy is the same thing. This is a deduction, and it's already on the list. So we can click New York State disability, and we don't have to bother about choosing another deduction, and we click Save. And we click Done. So now let's pay them and check the results. What you'll notice is that QuickBooks Online automatically creates the accounts necessary to account for any other deduction. Let's take a look. So we click Payroll App, Run Payroll, and we're using the pay schedule that has only Alan and Betty for week number 6 in this quarter. Click Continue. Notice they're both selected, and you have to count the dates in whatever quarter you're in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you're in the 6th week of your quarter, you should not have a paycheck for either of them, and you should have no trouble paying them. Of course, you have to put in Candy's regular hours because we did not set up the defaults for Candy for her regular hours. But all we have to do is put that in. And don't forget to advance the date in the way that we're doing in this class, just to make the payroll feature work. So in my case, I'm up to March 17th. Click Preview Payroll. Now look what happens when we drill down to either of the workers' checks. We go to the column of net pay, drill down, and you will now see the additional deductions that have been taken from the check. Employee deductions, New York State disability, only 60 cents the employer is being reimbursed for what they pay for the disability insurance for their workers. So we agree with it and we click Submit Payroll. It's probably something close to that for Alan as well. But now, when we check the results, we go Reports, Custom Reports, and we open up our good friend, the trial balance. We can see that the New York State disability, look at that, has been added as a payroll liability to the chart of accounts and shows up in the trial balance. I was right. It was about 60 cents each worker. And you can click to open it up. And you can see, yes, it was about 60 cents each worker based on the rules. So we click Reports, Standard Reports. We go down to Payroll. And where it says Deductions and Contributions, that's the report that's relevant for these items. So we double click. Remember, we want it this year and apply. And we can see New York State disability is owed $1.20. That means that this will be on this report and not on the payroll liability balances report, because that only has ones that are accountable to the government and not a private insurance company. Now, the details of these types of deductions will not show up on the previous payroll liability report that we used before because they are not taxes. They will instead show up on this report called Contributions and Deductions. So we click Reports, Standard Reports. We go down to Payroll, and where it says Deductions and Contributions, that's the report that's relevant for these items. So we double click. Remember, we want it this year and apply. And we can see New York State disability is owed $1.20. Now for our second example, let's imagine Dave has a judgment against him from a court ruling and owes somebody somewhere $100,000. He must pay 10% of his income to that person, and we have to deduct the amount from his check and pay it to that person. Of course, assuming they presented proper documentation from a court. Let's see how to set that up. So we click Employees. We go down to Dave Diakil, and we go down to his section of Deductions and Contributions. Start. Now this one is a garnishment, but you can get the same thing by adding a new one and choosing other deduction, and one of the choices is a wage garnishment. But there's slightly different information in this than if you just click Add Garnishment. Okay, this is Other Garnishment. Okay, Court ruling for whatever reason. Okay, the total amount owed. So that means there's a cap. We're going to make it that he owes $100,000 to someone, calculated as a percent of his paycheck, usually 10%, and there's no alternative cap in this case. So this is the information we know about Dave Diakil and his wage garnishment. And we click Save. And we click Done. And when we go to pay him his paycheck, again, QuickBooks Online will automatically create a new account just to show what's owed for what we withheld for Dave for his court ruling. Now let's pay Dave and see what happens. So we go up to Employee List, Run Payroll, and we're doing the salaried workers this time. Notice QuickBooks remembers the second pay period in the quarter. Betty already got paid, Dave did not. So his name is selected. And if we click Preview Payroll, we can drill down by going to the Net Pay column and double-clicking that icon. And you can see when it comes to employee deductions, Dave has a court ruling. And again, this is approximately 10% of the gross pay. So we agree that it worked, and we click Save, and we click Submit Payroll. And now when we go to look at the trial balance, you will see that the court ruling liability of what we owe, right here, payroll liabilities court ruling. It's not to a department of government, but it is a liability that we owe because we withheld it from Dave's check. And let's look at our other good friend, the new report. Reports, standard reports, go all the way down to payroll reports, and we get payroll deductions and contributions. Remember, we want everything we paid this year. We click Apply, and you can see this has been withheld, other garnishment, for Dave. In fact, we can even bookmark this, and we can name it Deductions and Contributions. And now we know all about this time.